Hey there, welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight we look at reactions to RFK's endorsement of Donald Trump.
Meanwhile, officials identify the Kabul suicide bomber in Afghanistan.
And Republican states sue over Biden's latest immigration policy. All right, we're going to start out with the latest updates from the ongoing presidential race, starting with the Harris campaign, where criticisms are mounting over her rather vague policy positions, as her website still doesn't have a single policy proposal. Writing in the Hill today, columnist Beckett Adams accused Harris of running a, quote, zero-substance campaign, calling it a hollow shell constructed entirely from feelings and emotions. However, some Democrats, such as New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, are pushing back on that accusation.
Look, I don't understand where this so-called vagary comes from. She released a pretty specific, detailed plan on a lot of her economic agenda, whether it's about trying to do specific things like with tax credits and more to create more housing and to help to create more supply and thus lower the cost of housing. She let out specific plans that really relate to like 40 other states' plans to stop price gouging. 40 other states' actual laws to stop price gouging. She's spoken really to the heart of issues that Americans are concerned about.
Booker also noted that Harris has expressed her support for federalizing abortion access as well, just to name some other policies. The criticism also comes amid growing pressure for Harris to hold an interview or press conference, something she still hasn't done more than a month into her campaign.
When is Kamala Harris going to do an interview? You said in an interview the other day, on her time. And that sort of sounds like stalling, because she had said she would do something by the end of the month. Is there still nothing set? Why is that?
Well, look, the vice president has said that she is going to sit down for an interview before the end of this month, and that is going to happen. The vice president has been out communicating with voters. She's done 80-plus interviews this year already as vice president, and she has been out talking to voters.
Now, as you've heard Cory Booker mention, the one thing the vice president isn't vague about is her economic plan. Harris plans a tax hike of $5 trillion in the next 10 years. The American public would feel the effects of this by making less money and paying more for consumer goods and services. It would also hike the small business tax rate to almost 40%, while corporate tax rates would be higher than in the EU or China. Harris's policies would make the U.S. less competitive by increasing capital gains and dividends tax to roughly 45%. In China, for instance, that rate is 20% at the moment. The Harris-Walz duo also wants to enact a second death tax on inherited assets. This would be an additional charge to the already existing death tax, hitting families, farmers, and small businesses the hardest. However, it's worth noting that a death tax hike had already failed in 1976 due to the nightmarish nature of the law. But that's not all. Harris also plans to increase Medicare taxes to 32% and a $37 billion tax on American energy. And some of the biggest political news over the weekend revolved around RFK Jr.'s decision to support the Trump campaign in battleground states. FISM's Ian Patrick has the details.
RFK Jr. really made some political waves with his decision to throw support behind former President Donald Trump for the 2024 election. Joining Trump on stage this past Friday, Kennedy explained his decision to a crowd of Trump supporters.
A few hours after the assassination attempt at Butler, I got a call from a safe food advocate named Kelly Means that he'd been advising me for many years and on my campaign. And he told me that night that he was also advising President Trump. And he asked if I would talk to President Trump. And I said, of course. And we talked about, not about the things that separate us because we don't agree on everything, but on the values and the issues that bind us together. Don't you want a president who's going to protect America's freedoms? And who is going to protect us against totalitarianism?
The Trump campaign does seem to already be benefiting from Kennedy's support. According to Trump campaign senior advisor Tim Murtaugh, many battleground state voters are already moving to support the Republican candidate.
In every single one of those 7 battleground states, all of these RFK voters, RFK Jr. voters, break towards Trump. Some of them, Trump is getting 2/3 of the RFK voters, and he's getting about 4%, 3% in these states. And in a state like Pennsylvania, where it could well come down to, tens of thousands of votes, a half a point or 3/4 of a point, that may well make the difference in who the next president is.
But the independent candidate has also received a heavy bout of criticism for this decision. And some of these critiques even come from his own family members. Since Friday's announcement, RFK's sister Carrie has been making the rounds on national TV, expressing her disappointment in her brother.
And I think if my dad were alive today, the real Robert Kennedy would have detested almost everything Donald Trump represents. So I'm outraged and disgusted by my brother's gaudy and obscene embrace of Donald Trump. I love my brother, but this is an outrage. And I completely disavow and separate and dissociate myself from him on this issue.
Other members of the Kennedy family have also come out of the woodwork on the matter. Max Kennedy, RFK Jr.'s brother, wrote in an op-ed for the Los Angeles Times that this endorsement marked what he called a hollow grab for power, a strategic attempt at relevance. He further wrote that the family was beyond disappointment and that they are, quote, in mourning. 5 of his siblings also signed and issued a public statement which endorsed Kamala Harris for president and said that RFK Jr.'s endorsement of Trump, quote, is a betrayal of the values that our father and our family hold most dear. Even RFK Jr.'s wife, actress Cheryl Hines, didn't seem completely on board with his decision. The independent candidate said that Hines was, quote, very uncomfortable with the decision to back Trump. But RFK Jr. is sticking to his guns while trying to extend a proverbial olive branch to his family in order to discuss this issue.
My family is at the center of the Democratic Party. I understand that they're troubled by my decisions, but, I love my family. I feel like we were raised in a milieu where we were encouraged to debate each other and debate ferociously and passionately about things, but to still love each other. So, they can... they're free to take their positions on these issues.
This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thanks so much for that report there, Ian. I'm sure we're going to continue to feel the political reverberations of his endorsement. Elsewhere in the fight for life, Republican VP candidate J.D. Vance says Donald Trump would veto a federal abortion ban should one ever land on his desk. Vance made those comments yesterday on NBC's Meet the Press.
If such a piece of legislation landed on Donald Trump's desk, would he veto it?
Well, I think it'd be very clear he would not support it. I mean, he said that explicitly. Yeah, I mean, if you're not supporting it as the President of the United States, you fundamentally have to veto it.
So he would veto a federal abortion ban?
I think he would. He said that explicitly, that he would.
During the interview, Vance also reiterated Trump's position of leaving abortion policy up to the states, saying, quote, we don't want to have a nonstop federal conflict over this issue.
Can you commit, Senator, sitting right here with me today, that if you and Donald Trump are elected, that you will not impose a federal ban on abortion?
I can absolutely commit that, Kristen, and Donald Trump has been as clear about that as possible. I think it's important to step back and say, what has Donald Trump actually said on the abortion question, and how is it different from what Kamala Harris and the Democrats have said? Donald Trump wants to end this culture war over this particular topic. If California wants to have a different abortion policy from Ohio, then Ohio has to respect California, and California has to respect Ohio.
Now, the interview comes amid some frustrations from pro-life Republicans over Trump's recent messaging on abortion. Posting on Truth Social on Friday, Trump said, quote, my administration will be great for women and their reproductive rights. The comment was widely panned by pro-lifers, with Lila Rose of Live Action accusing Trump of trying to sound like a Democrat. All right, and coming up next, after 3 long years, the U.S. has finally identified the Kabul suicide bomber in Afghanistan that killed 13 U.S. service members. The details on that discovery and more after this short break.
Hi, I'm Aisha. At first, I was debating whether or not I was really pregnant and took a test. While I was waiting, they talked to me about different pregnancy choices and different options and information that helped me be more educated. To confirm, I got an ultrasound of the pregnancy test, and it was for sure positive, and I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partners today.
And welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's continue with an update from the Middle East, where the Department of Defense has identified the suicide bomber who killed 13 U.S. soldiers and wounded over 170 Afghanis in 2021. The man's name was Abdul Rahman al-Oghari, who had been an ISIS member since 2016. An Army official says al-Oghari was one of the many ISIS members released from prison in mid-August of 2021. The review concluded that even if al-Oghari's terror attempt was intercepted, others were ready to carry out the bombing. Therefore, the incident was not preventable at the tactical level. One Army official added, quote, "It is important to note that multiple Marines emphasized that leaders were present and engaged throughout operations at Abbey Gate." Photos commemorating the 13 fallen U.S. soldiers are now posted in the Abbey Gate team's office as a way to honor their service. One official said this is to always remind us of the fallen service members and the importance of what we're doing.
Very important to remember indeed. We'll always try to remember their service and sacrifice that they gave for this nation over there in Afghanistan. Still in the Middle East, Israel and Hezbollah continued to exchange fire over the weekend, beginning yesterday when Hezbollah struck multiple sites in Israel. Here's IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari with the details on what happened.
A short while ago, the IDF identified Hezbollah terrorist organization preparing to fire missiles, rockets towards Israeli territory. In a self-defense act to remove these threats, the IDF is striking terror targets in Lebanon from which Hezbollah was planning to launch their attacks on Israeli civilians.
According to Israeli officials, roughly 100 fighter jets struck attack drones and rocket launchers in Lebanon, preventing what would have been otherwise a much larger attack. In fact, IDF officials later said they believe as many as 6,000 rockets were destroyed. Now, despite the rapid response, however, at least some rockets did manage to strike cities across Israel, including the city of Tel Aviv. Hezbollah says the attack was in response to the death of their commander, Fuad Shakur. Israel later retaliated by striking positions in southern Lebanon.
Meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine exchanged over 100 prisoners of war on Saturday. Ukrainian officials say Russia returned 115 captured conscripts to Ukraine in exchange for 115 Russian servicemen who were captured in the recent Ukrainian offensive into Russia's Kursk region. The reported negotiator of the exchange was the UAE. In a statement, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said, quote, "We remember each and every one. We are searching and doing our best to get everyone back. According to the UN, both Ukraine and Russia have been accused of mistreating prisoners of war, with allegations including malnutrition, medical neglect, as well as physical and psychological abuse. Neither country officially reports how many prisoners of war they have currently. The exchange comes as Ukraine celebrates its third Independence Day since the invasion. Although no official grand celebrations are planned, Ukrainian officials have reportedly organized a solemn remembrance for fallen soldiers and civilians.
At the same time, the U.S. has now sanctioned hundreds of Russian firms on Friday. U.S. officials accused nearly 400 individuals and businesses in Russia, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East of enabling Russia's war effort and evading pre-existing sanctions. Among them are 60 Russia-based technology and defense companies. The Treasury Department also targeted 3 transnational networks that supply ammunition and military parts to Moscow. The U.S. is now urging companies and foreign governments to ensure they are not supporting Russia's military-industrial supply chains.
At the same time, a member of ISIS surrendered to German authorities on Saturday, just one day after a horrific mass knife attack. The attack happened in Solingen as the city celebrated 650 years. 3 people were killed and another 8 injured in the attack, 4 of which remain in critical condition. Isa al-H confessed to the stabbings, omitting his surname per German privacy laws. ISIS claimed that it was behind the attack, describing the assailant as a soldier of the group. They say the 26-year-old man is a Syrian national. The young man committed the atrocity near a refugee camp, and this comes as the nation debates immigration and asylum laws as conservative politicians seek gains in next week's regional elections.
And moving now to Canada, where 9,000 rail workers returned to work today following a Labour Board ruling on Saturday. Major rail lines ground to a halt on Thursday after 2 different companies locked the workers out. Simultaneously, the powerful Teamsters Union issued a 3-day strike notice for at least one of those companies. The union now plans to appeal, saying it sets a dangerous precedent that empowers big companies. It follows only months of bitter negotiations over new contracts. Those talks have in fact disrupted freight shipping throughout the entire nation of Canada, with the companies warning it could take weeks to fully recover. Last week, the government ordered all parties involved to begin the arbitration process. And we have plenty more news coming up next. We'll be right back after a moment in history.
Welcome back to Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Well, it's Game 6 of the 1986 World Series, and the heavily favored Boston Red Sox, still searching for their first title since they parted ways with Babe Ruth less than a year after the end of World War I, were leading the New York Mets 3-2 in a best-of-7 series. The game was tied after 9 innings, but in the first extra frame, the Sox went up 5-3 on a clutch home run from Dave Henderson, sending the Mets crowd at Shea Stadium into stunned silence. When the Mets came up in the bottom of the 10th, the Sox retired the first 2 batters, standing 1 out away from a World Series title. With barely a shred of hope, Gary Carter lined a single to left to keep the Mets season alive. Then Kevin Mitchell singled and Ray Knight came to the plate. Down to their final strike, at this point, the Mets stayed alive as Knight fought off an inside fastball to bloop a single to center, scoring Carter and cutting the Red Sox lead in half, 5-4. Now, at this point, with 2 outs and runners at the corners, Red Sox manager John McNamara sent pitcher Calvin Schiraldi to the showers and elected to bring in reliever Bob Stanley to get that final out for the Red Sox. Mets speedster Mookie Wilson stepped to the plate. Working the count to 2-2, and again with the team 1 strike away from defeat, Wilson battled, fouling off several pitches. Finally, Stanley lost control of a fastball, and the ball zipped past the catcher and went to the backstop. Mitchell motored home from third base, tying the game, and Knight moved into scoring position with the winning run at second. The Mets now had all the momentum. Stanley towed the rubber and fired home, and Wilson dribbled a routine ground ball to first baseman Bill Buckner that 99% of the time would have been an easy out to send the game into the 11th inning. But shockingly, Buckner went down to field the ball, and it scooted right between his legs into right field. Knight rounded third and scored easily, sending Shea Stadium into a delighted frenzy and the Red Sox bench into a stunned stupor. The Sox had snatched defeat from the jaws of victory and lost Game 6, tying the series up at 3 games apiece. Immediately, Buckner was the scapegoat for his game-ending error, but in the decades since his game, baseball historians have agreed that a host of factors contributed to this harrowing Red Sox defeat. In Game 6, Stanley's pass ball, Calvin Schiraldi's 10th inning unraveling, the Mets' ability to string together several clutch hits all contributed, and of course, there was also the specter of the alleged curse of the Bambino, where the Sox had now gone almost 70 years with no World Series title since Ruth was sold to the Yankees. Of course, historians sometimes forget the series was not over. The Sox could have put it all behind them in Game 7 had they won, but the Mets, with their home crowd and all the momentum from their miracle comeback in Game 6, were not to be outdone. The Sox jumped out to an early lead and held a 3-0 lead actually as late as the 6th inning, but then the Mets rallied once again with 3 runs in the 6th and 3 more in the 7th. The Red Sox never regained the lead and lost the game 8-5, and with it, the 1986 World Series. For the Red Sox, it would be another 18 years and at least one more horrendous playoff defeat before they would finally hoist the World Series trophy in 2004. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
Are you tired of the chaos? There are a lot of things that make noise, but only a few that truly matter. As a parent, I want to leave something that will last for a long time.
You invest $300 a month increase on slowly by the time you retire.
Not just an inheritance of money, but a legacy of godly values.
Here at Financial Issues, we want to help you grow your money, but our main goal is to help you honor God with the money that He's given you.
Invest your money in a God-honoring way. Go to financialissues.org.
It was sobbing. It was a cry for prayer for God. I'm so sorry, please. So I got on the internet and I just started seeing like abortion pill reversal, and I found a hotline number. We're gonna get this started, and it's gonna seem like a lot, but it's gonna be so fast, and it's because you only have a certain amount of time left. It's gonna be okay. We got this. We're gonna try to fix this for you and make sure you know you're good and the baby's good. Don't worry. And when I came here, my heart was so warm. Other than Planned Parenthood, where I was very cold and I was lost, and I just felt like I could have been, it was just terrible. And to know that Compass Care could tell me something different and get reverse a medication like that, that's amazing. That somebody would go as hard as if it was their children to make sure your child is gonna be alive and stay safe, So I want a lot of people to know it's possible. You can save your baby. You can reverse that abortion.
And welcome back to FISM News. Once again, I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's take a look at the economy, where Fed Chair Jerome Powell said on Friday that inflation is in a positive trajectory.
Our restrictive monetary policy helped restore balance between aggregate supply and demand, easing inflationary pressures and ensuring that inflation expectations remained well anchored. Inflation is now much closer to our objective, with prices having risen 2.5% over the past 12 months. After a pause earlier this year, progress toward our 2% objective has resumed. My confidence has grown that inflation is on a sustainable path back to 2%.
Powell also indicated that interest rates could be cut soon.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
Following his announcement, the Dow Jones rose by 1.14%, the Nasdaq Composite rose by 1.47%, and the S&P 500 advanced by 1.45%, showing a winning week for the stock market. Chief Investment Officer of Reagan Capital, Skylar Wienen, said, quote, "The market is kind of breathing a sigh of relief as we've taken a right turn towards an easy cycle. But the debate over how much the Fed will cut interest rates remains to be seen."
And in some more national news today, 16 Republican-led states are now suing the Biden administration over a program that would grant legal residency status to roughly 500,000 illegal migrants, arguing it violates federal law. The so-called parole-in-place program was announced by President Biden back in June. What it would do is it would give legal pathways to citizenship to illegal immigrants currently married to U.S. citizens and who have been living in the country for at least 10 years now. now. Led by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, the lawsuit says Biden's program not only is unconstitutional, but also rewards illegal immigration and would cause quantifiable financial harm to the states. The White House has since responded to this lawsuit, claiming it aims to separate families and goes against our nation's values.
And conservative states aren't the only ones concerned about illegal immigrants, as more than half the American public is worried about illegal voters. The Post-Millennial reports that 54% of registered voters believe it's likely that illegal immigrants will be voting in the elections this year. When we break those numbers down, 27% believe that it's somewhat likely, while another 27% said it's very likely that non-citizens will vote. The poll from the Neapolitan News Service also showed that 87% of respondents favored requiring voter IDs. The rise in election integrity concerns comes as more and more politicians are worried about the voter registration process. States such as Texas and Arizona are on guard this year to make sure no foul play occurs during the elections.
And we saw some free speech concerns over the weekend as Telegram founder and CEO Pavel Durov was arrested by French authorities for not cooperating with law enforcement over content moderation on his popular messaging app. Authorities allege that Telegram has been used to facilitate drug trafficking and child sexual content, among other crimes, although French officials have ordered Telegram to take steps towards moderating criminal use of the app. Company executives have denied a lack of content moderation. The arrest has since sparked global condemnations from notable free speech figures such as ex-CEO Elon Musk and also former presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who posted on social media, quote, "The need to protect free speech has never been more urgent."
At the same time, pro-life pregnancy centers in New York can continue to champion progesterone as an abortion pill reversal while a federal lawsuit plays out. A federal court agreed last week that the First Amendment protects the center's right to share information on the life-saving option with women in crisis pregnancies. The preliminary judgment comes after the center sued New York Attorney General Letitia James, saying she abused her authority with unlawful censorship. The Attorney General recently opened lawsuits against 11 faith-based centers for spreading so-called false and misleading information. However, abortion pill reversals have likely saved more than 5,000 unborn babies and have a success rate of at least 64%. The centers, who are represented by Alliance Defending Freedom, argue that women should be allowed to reconsider their abortions.
Women deserve to know all of the options that are before them when they're considering how to proceed with their pregnancy. If a woman does not want to continue with a chemical abortion, she deserves to know that there's an option out there that could potentially save her child. And in 5,000 cases plus, at this point, has saved unborn children in about 5,000 cases.
It's very sad because it goes to show that so much of this isn't even about pro-choice anymore. It's really just pro-abortion, because if you were really pro-choice, you'd be okay if a woman decided to reverse her decision to have an abortion. Very sad.
Right. But at the same time, it's encouraging to know that you can reverse abortions, chemical abortions. Yeah. All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And for more updates until our next show tomorrow night, you can check us out on social media at FISM News or the FISM app. Thanks so much. We'll see you tomorrow.